The grand hall of Nexus Station sparkled with the light of 1,000 stars visible through its transparent dome. For 300 years, the Galactic Council had maintained peace across thousands of worlds. Today should have been no different. Just another treaty signing. Another step toward continued harmony among the stars. Commander Peter Ross stood at attention near the Earth delegation, his blue uniform crisp and formal. He scanned the room out of habit, noting the positions of the various alien representatives. The tall, willowy Xylani with their silvery skin clustered together on one side. The varied species of the consortium of free worlds mingled in the center, some floating, some crawling, some walking on 2, 4, or 6 legs. Lisa Winters, Earth's chief ambassador, stepped forward to address the council. Her voice carried clearly across the chamber. Honored representatives, today we reaffirm our commitment to peaceful cooperation and... A blinding flash cut her words short. The explosion ripped through the center of the hall, sending delegates flying in all directions. Ross reacted instantly, diving toward Winters and pulling her to the floor as secondary blasts erupted near the Xylani delegation. "Stay down," he shouted, drawing his sidearm. Through the smoke, he saw the bodies of 3 council elders lying motionless. The Privex ambassador, a gentle 4-armed being known for mediating the most difficult disputes, lay dead next to them. Screams and shouts in a dozen languages filled the air. Security forces rushed in, but more explosions followed. Ross spotted a group of masked figures firing indiscriminately into the crowd. "We need to get you out of here," he told Winters, helping her to her feet. Blood trickled down her forehead from a cut, but she seemed otherwise unharmed. "The other human delegates," she gasped, looking around desperately. "No time. Security protocol says we evacuate you first." As they moved toward the exit, a Xylani official pointed at them. "The humans. They brought weapons into the sacred chamber. This is their doing." The accusation spread quickly. A consortium minister raised his voice above the chaos. "Arrest the Earth delegation. This is an act of war." Ross pulled Winters through a service corridor as station alarms blared. His communicator buzzed with an emergency signal from Earth Command. The message was short: "Return to Earth immediately. All diplomatic channels compromised. Trust no one." They reached the docking bay where other human staff were already boarding their ship. Captain Olivia Grant, the pilot, waved them in urgently. "What's happening?" Ross asked as the doors sealed behind them. "It's not just here," Grant said, her face grim as she started the launch sequence. "We're getting reports of attacks at every major diplomatic outpost. The Galactic Communication Network is going dark sector by sector. Someone's taking down the whole system." Winters collapsed into a seat, her diplomatic composure finally breaking. "This can't be happening. We were so close to the new trade agreement." Ross checked a data tablet showing incoming reports. "It's not random. Look at this footage from the explosion." He zoomed in on a small object that had been thrown just before the blast. "That's not standard explosive tech. That's a Krell disruptor. They're supposed to be extinct." The ship shuddered as it broke free from the station. Through the viewport, Ross saw flashes of weapons fire. 2 Xylani cruisers were firing on a consortium vessel. Several smaller ships were trying to flee. "I found something," one of the junior diplomats called out, analyzing data from his station. The communication disruption started 12 minutes before the first explosion. Someone wanted to make sure no warnings got out. As their ship accelerated away from Nexus Station, Ross watched the beginning of what would soon spread across the galaxy. The carefully maintained peace was collapsing like a house of cards. "Set course for Earth," he ordered, "and prepare for possible pursuit. As of now, we're at war with everyone." Winters looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the distant explosions. "No, Commander. This is something worse than war. This is anarchy." The ship shuddered violently as it dropped out of hyperspace. Commander Peter Ross gripped his seat as warning lights flashed across the control panel. "Engine failure. Coolant leak in the main drive," Captain Grant announced, her fingers flying over the controls. "We can't make it to Earth. We need to land now." Lisa Winters looked at the navigation screen. "Helios. It's a human frontier colony. We can land there." The ship limped toward the small blue-green planet. Ross sent an emergency signal, but received only static in return. Galactic communications were still down everywhere. They landed roughly on the outskirts of New Haven, Helios's main settlement. Smoke rose from the damaged engine as they exited the ship. A small group of colonists approached cautiously, led by a stern-looking woman. "I'm Governor Mary Harlow," she said. "You're lucky you made it down in one piece. We've had 3 refugee ships crash in the past day." Ross showed his identification. "Commander Peter Ross, Earth Fleet. This is Ambassador Lisa Winters. Our ship was damaged escaping Nexus Station after an attack." Harlow's expression darkened. "We know. The little news we've received is bad. The Galactic Council has officially disbanded. Several major powers are blaming Earth for the attacks." "That's ridiculous," Winters said. "We had nothing to gain from destroying the Council." "Truth doesn't matter much now," a man's voice called out. He approached from behind the governor, tall with a weathered face and keen eyes. "What matters is who has the biggest guns." "This is Alan Carter," Harlow explained. "Former military intelligence. He retired here 5 years ago." Carter studied Ross and Winters carefully. "The timing is interesting. The Council falls just as trade sanctions against the Tsilani Empire were about to be enforced. Convenient for them." They walked to the colony's main hall, passing worried colonists preparing defenses. Inside, Carter pulled up a star map showing red markers spreading across multiple sectors. "Conflicts are breaking out everywhere," he explained. "Trade routes are being attacked. The Tsilani have already invaded 2 consortium worlds. But there's something else happening." He pointed to several isolated locations. "These attacks don't make strategic sense unless someone wanted chaos specifically," Ross finished. Carter nodded. "I've been tracking a group called the Ascendancy for years. Most thought they were a myth, but I found evidence they've been working behind the scenes, destabilizing governments and encouraging conflicts." "Why would anyone want to destroy peace?" Winters asked. "Some believe that peace makes species weak," Carter replied. "The Ascendancy thinks evolution only happens through struggle and war." A commotion outside interrupted them. Governor Harlow hurried in. Another refugee ship just landed, this one carrying Felorians. "Felorians?" Ross asked. "They're a peaceful species. Why would they flee?" "Because they're being hunted," Carter said grimly. "Just like the Mavari and the Trill. All smaller species with strategic resources, but limited military power." Winters looked out the window at the frightened alien refugees being helped by human colonists. "It's not just us being targeted." That night, as Ross helped set up defense perimeters around the colony, supply ships arrived from the nearest Earth military outpost. Their communications officer brought troubling news. "Earth has recalled all diplomatic missions," she reported. "All human colonies are on high alert. The Tsilani have declared humans enemies of galactic peace." Carter joined Ross on the perimeter wall, watching the stars. "This colony will be overrun soon if we don't get help." "Why would someone orchestrate all this?" Ross asked. "War creates opportunities," Carter replied. "And someone's been planning this for a very long time." He handed Ross a small data drive. "I've been collecting information on the Ascendancy for years. Their operatives have infiltrated every major power, including Earth." Ross looked at the drive, then back at the colony, where humans were sharing their limited supplies with alien refugees. "We need to get this information to Earth Command," he said. "And we need to find out who's really behind this before the entire galaxy tears itself apart." In the distance, the sky lit up briefly as another damaged ship entered the atmosphere, bringing more refugees to a planet that was quickly becoming one of the last safe havens in an increasingly dangerous galaxy. 3 days after their arrival on Helios, Ross woke to the sound of alarms. He rushed outside to see a large military vessel entering the atmosphere. His hand moved to his weapon until he recognized the markings. "It's one of ours," he said as Winters joined him. "Earth Fleet." The ship landed smoothly in the colony's main square. Its ramp lowered, and a woman in an admiral's uniform walked out, flanked by armed soldiers. "Admiral Susan Mitchell," Ross said, saluting. "I didn't expect Fleet Command to send someone so high-ranking." "The situation demanded it," Mitchell replied. Her stern face showed no emotion, but her eyes scanned the colony carefully. "I have orders to bring you and Ambassador Winters back to Earth immediately, and to activate Protocol Omega." Carter, who had been watching from nearby, stepped forward. "Protocol Omega? That's just a rumor." Mitchell studied him. "Alan Carter, your file says you retired." "Apparently not completely." She turned to Ross. "Commander, it's time Earth showed its true capabilities." Inside the colony's command center, Mitchell activated a secure communication device. The screen showed a man in a lab coat surrounded by advanced technology. "Admiral." The man nodded. "I take it we're going with full disclosure." "Yes, Joe." "Activate the shield network and prepare the Valiant fleet." Joe Fletcher, head of Earth's Research and Development Division, smiled slightly. "Finally, I've been improving these systems for 20 years with nobody to show them to." Mitchell turned to the others. "For centuries, humanity has deliberately downplayed our military capabilities. We presented ourselves as technologically behind the other major powers. It was the only way to join the Galactic Council without appearing as a threat." The screen changed to show images of massive ships emerging from hidden bases on Earth's moon and throughout the solar system. They looked nothing like the outdated vessels Earth had always claimed were its best defense. While the Tylanian consortium built bigger warships and flaunted their weapons, we developed technologies they never imagined, Mitchell continued. Adaptive shield systems, gravity manipulation drives, precision targeting that can disable enemy ships without casualties. Ross stared at the images in shock. "I've been in the fleet for 12 years. How did I not know?" "Compartmentalization," Carter guessed. "Only those who absolutely needed to know were told." "Exactly," Mitchell confirmed. "Even most of our own military was kept in the dark." A younger officer rushed in. "Admiral, we've detected multiple ships entering the Helios system. Cylani war cruisers." "How many?" Ross asked. 5, the officer replied. "Standard attack formation." Mitchell smiled coolly. "They expect to find an undefended colony. Let's disappoint them." She activated her communicator. "Fletcher, deploy defense satellite H-12." From Mitchell's ship, a small object launched into orbit. Within minutes, it unfolded into a sophisticated defense platform. "We've placed these near every human colony," Mitchell explained, "dormant until needed." The colony's screen showed the approaching Tylani ships. Suddenly, the lead vessel stopped, then the others. Their weapons powered down involuntarily. "What did you do?" Winters asked. "Energy disruption field," Fletcher explained from the screen. "Non-lethal but very effective. They'll drift for about 6 hours before systems reset." As they watched, an urgent message came through from a distant colony. It showed footage of another alien attack, but this time the colony's hidden defenses had activated. The attackers retreated in confusion after their weapons failed. Carter approached Ross privately. "While this is impressive, we have a more immediate problem." He led Ross and Winters to his quarters, where a bound alien sat in a corner. "I caught this Ascendancy operative trying to access the colony's communication array," Carter explained. "They were going to send our location to multiple hostile fleets." The alien glared at them with 4 yellow eyes. "You think your hidden weapons will save you? The Ascendancy has planned for centuries. This is just the beginning." Ross knelt before the prisoner. "Why destroy the peace? What do you gain from this chaos?" "Peace is stagnation," the alien hissed. "Only through conflict do species evolve. The strongest will survive. The rest will perish, as they should." Winters studied the alien. We need to warn others. Form alliances with species also targeted for extinction. Mitchell nodded in agreement. Earth is already reaching out to other marginalized species. We're calling it the Solidarity Pact. The ascendancy will destroy you all. The prisoner growled. Ross stood up, determination in his eyes. They can try. The images on the screen made Ross's blood boil. A Tylani battle group had attacked the peaceful farming colony of New Eden. The settlement burned while civilians tried to flee. More than 2,000 dead, most of them families with children. They launched the attack before our defense systems could be activated, Admiral Mitchell explained. Her voice was steady, but her hands clenched into fists. This was deliberate targeting of non-military targets. Lisa Winters watched the footage with tears in her eyes. All those people, gone. Mitchell turned to the officers gathered in the war room. Earth has tried to play by the rules. We limited our responses, showed restraint. That ends today. Across the room, Joe Fletcher nodded. The Valiant Fleet is ready. Strike teams are on standby. Mitchell pointed to a star map showing enemy supply lines. These are our targets. Commander Ross, you'll lead the Special Operations Team. Your mission is to extract these scientists from Cylani territory. She highlighted several names. They oppose their government's war policies and may have vital information. Ross studied the information. That's deep in enemy space. How do we get in undetected? Fletcher smiled slightly. We have ships that Cylani scanners can't see. 2 days later, Ross crouched inside a sleek black vessel as it slipped past Tylani patrols. His team consisted of 6 Special Forces soldiers, each armed with weapons no human had publicly acknowledged possessing. Approaching drop point, the pilot announced. Stealth systems holding. Ross checked his gear one last time. Remember, this is an extraction mission. No casualties unless absolutely necessary. The team deployed to the surface of Tylor Prime, a major Xylani research world. Using scanner-proof suits, they moved through the city undetected, finally reaching a secluded compound. Inside, they found 5 Cylani scientists huddled in fear. The lead scientist, a female named Vreen, approached cautiously. You are human, she said. Have you come to kill us for what our military did? Ross shook his head. We're here to get you out. We know you tried to stop the attacks. Vreen's silvery skin rippled with emotion. My team developed defensive technology only. When they used our work to create planet-killer weapons, we protested. They were going to execute us tomorrow. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Admiral Mitchell's fleet executed a series of precision strikes. Human ships appeared seemingly from nowhere, disabled Tylani and consortium military vessels, and vanished before reinforcements arrived. Not a single civilian target was hit, but enemy supply lines collapsed within hours. Back on Earth, Winters used her diplomatic skills in a new way. She broadcast messages to dissident groups within enemy territories. We know many of you disagree with your leader's actions, she said. The Solidarity Forces have established safe corridors for those seeking refuge. We do not target civilians. We do not seek vengeance. We seek only to end this conflict. The response was immediate. Ships carrying refugees from dozens of worlds flooded the safe corridors. Many brought valuable intelligence about enemy movements. On Helios, Alan Carter worked tirelessly to piece together information about the Ascendancy. The colony had become a key base for the growing Solidarity Forces. I found something, Carter told Governor Harlow, pointing to patterns in attack data. The Ascendancy agents are everywhere, but they communicate using specific frequencies. His discovery allowed Solidarity Forces to identify infiltrators across multiple worlds. When Ross returned with the Tylani scientists, he found the war had transformed in just 2 weeks. Human forces no longer hid their true capabilities. Solidarity ships now openly challenged larger powers, using strategies no hierarchical military could match. The enemy expected us to fight like them, Mitchell explained during the debriefing. Rigid chain of command, predictable tactics. Instead, we gave field commanders autonomy. We changed strategies constantly. Their leadership can't adapt fast enough. Vreen, that Xylani scientist, studied the battle reports with growing amazement. Your species fights unlike any I've seen. You use minimal force for maximum effect. You target systems, not lives. That's because our goal isn't destruction, Ross replied. It's protection. Carter entered with new intelligence. The Ascendancy is getting desperate. They're pushing the Xylani to use biological weapons next. But we're getting closer to identifying their leadership. Ross looked at the galactic map, now showing Solidarity-controlled zones in green. For the first time, I think we might actually win this. 1 month into the conflict, the war room on Earth buzzed with activity. Maps and data streams covered every screen as intelligence poured in from Solidarity forces across the galaxy. We've identified a pattern, Carter said, pointing to a series of locations highlighted in red. Every major Ascendancy attack happened within 2 days of unusual energy readings in these sectors. Admiral Mitchell studied the map. What kind of energy? Nothing natural, Joe Fletcher replied. It's similar to wormhole radiation, but more controlled, like doorways opening between dimensions. Ross looked at the data. So they're not based in our galaxy at all. That would explain why we've never found their homeworld, Carter said. They've been hiding in a pocket dimension, watching us, manipulating events from afar. Vreen, the Xylani scientist who had become a valuable ally, approached the central table. In ancient Xylani texts, there are stories of the Watchers, beings of pure energy who tested worthy species with conflict. Most dismissed these as myths. Every myth has some basis in truth, Winters added. She had just returned from negotiating a temporary truce with moderate factions of the Xylani and consortium. The question is, how do we fight an enemy that isn't even in our dimension? Fletcher smiled. We reverse engineer their own technology. The energy signatures can be tracked back to their source. 2 days later, Ross led a small team to a remote asteroid facility that intelligence identified as an Ascendancy outpost. They moved silently through dark corridors until they reached a central chamber. Inside, a swirling portal of blue energy pulsed with power. Dimensional gateway, Fletcher's voice said through their comms. Just as we suspected. Ross approached cautiously. No signs of life. This might be automated. Suddenly, the portal flared brighter. A figure emerged, not solid, but a swirling mass of energy loosely shaped like a humanoid. It glowed with an inner light that shifted between blue and purple. Humans, the being said, its voice seeming to come from everywhere at once. You have proven more resilient than expected. Ross raised his weapon instinctively, but the energy being made no aggressive moves. What are you? Ross demanded. We are the Ascendancy. We were the first sentient species in this galaxy, evolving beyond physical form eons ago. We have guided the development of younger races since time immemorial. Guided? Ross challenged. You've manipulated us into wars. Millions have died because of you. The being's light pulsed. Through conflict, species evolve. Through struggle, the worthy survive. Peace brings stagnation. The Galactic Council was preventing natural selection. Carter stepped forward. You feed on it somehow, don't you? The conflict, the chaos, it sustains you. The being's light flickered. Perceptive. The energy of conflict fuels our immortality. Without it, we would fade. Before anyone could respond, the team's tech expert called out, Commander, I've accessed their data network. It's massive. Histories of thousands of species, records of manipulated conflicts going back millions of years. Download everything, Ross ordered. The energy being moved closer. Your species shows promise. Join us. Help us guide the galaxy's evolution. By killing billions. Ross asked. That's not evolution. That's genocide. While they talked, the tech finished the download. Got it. Including coordinates for their homeworld. The energy being flared angrily. You cannot stop what we have begun. Even now, the major powers prepare for total war. Ross smiled grimly. Watch us. The team retreated as the being launched energy bolts at them. Once safely aboard their ship, they transmitted the data to Earth. In the war room, Admiral Mitchell reviewed the information with growing determination. We have them now. Their homeworld exists in a pocket dimension, accessible only through specific gateways. Winters looked troubled. The Ascendancy has existed for millions of years. They've manipulated countless civilizations. How do we fight beings of pure energy? The same way we fought everyone else, Mitchell replied. By doing what they never expect. Carter studied the dimensional coordinates. They've been harvesting conflict energy to maintain their immortality. Cut off that supply. And they start to weaken. Fletcher finished. We need to coordinate with all Solidarity forces. This will be the largest joint operation in galactic history. Ross looked at the assembled team. The Ascendancy thought they were testing us. Instead, they've united the galaxy against them. The largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history gathered near the edge of known space. Ships from 27 different species hung in the darkness, their lights twinkling like artificial stars. At the center of the formation, Admiral Mitchell's command vessel coordinated final preparations. All ships report ready, her communications officer announced. Mitchell nodded. Send the signal. Operation Endgame begins now. Ross stood in the briefing room with his ground team. They wore newly designed combat suits that Fletcher's team had created specifically to operate in the Ascendancy's dimension. Once we enter the gateway, standard physics may not apply, Ross explained to the multinational team. Stay together and remember your training. Carter checked his specialized equipment. The gateway will put us directly on their homeworld. Our job is to locate and disable their consciousness network, the system they use to project themselves into our dimension. Across the room, screens showed the combined Solidarity fleet approaching the largest dimensional gateway yet discovered. Hidden in a remote nebula, the massive structure pulsed with energy as the fleet drew near. We expect resistance. Mitchell's voice came through the comm system. The Ascendancy has existed for millions of years. They won't surrender easily. The fleet surrounded the gateway, energy weapons powered and ready. For a moment, everything was still. Then the gateway flared to life, and dozens of energy beings poured out, their forms crackling with power. Defensive positions, Mitchell ordered. Shield frequencies rotating as planned. The energy beings attacked the fleet, sending bolts of power that dissolved 3 ships before the defenses adjusted. The Solidarity forces returned fire with specially calibrated weapons designed by Fletcher and Vreen. As the space battle raged, Ross's team approached the gateway in a small, heavily shielded vessel. They slipped through the chaos, diving toward the swirling portal at the center of the structure. Entering gateway in 3, 2, 1, the pilot announced. Light engulfed them as reality seemed to twist. When the light faded, they found themselves in a strange landscape. The sky above was not black but swirling purple and blue. The ground beneath their feet looked solid but rippled like water when touched. Life signs, Ross asked the team's medical officer. Nothing our scanners recognize as life, she replied. But there's energy everywhere. They moved forward, following Carter's readings toward a massive crystal structure in the distance. As they approached, energy beings began to materialize around them. They know we're here, Carter warned. The team activated their protective shields just as the beings attacked. The shields held, allowing them to push forward through increasingly difficult terrain. The energy readings are off the charts, the tech specialist reported. The entire dimension is like one giant power source. They reached the crystal structure after fighting through waves of defenders. Inside, they found what appeared to be the heart of the Ascendancy's power, a pulsing core of light connected to thousands of smaller crystals. This is it, Carter said. Their consciousness network. Each crystal contains the mind of one Ascendancy being. Ross studied the system. How do we shut it down without killing them all? We don't need to kill them, Carter replied. We just need to sever their connection to our dimension and cut off their supply of conflict energy. While the team worked to reconfigure the network, the space battle intensified. The Solidarity fleet pushed forward despite heavy losses, their combined firepower slowly gaining ground against the energy beings. In Mitchell's command ship, Fletcher monitored the dimensional readings. Something's happening, he called out. Massive power buildup at the center of their dimension. Mitchell's tactical officer looked up in alarm. Admiral, we're detecting activation sequences in dormant ascendancy tech throughout the galaxy. They're linking together. On the main screen, a message from Winters appeared. Admiral, our intelligence network just intercepted ascendancy communications. They're activating something called the Galactic Reset Device. It's designed to trigger supernova in stars across the galaxy. Mitchell's face paled. How many stars? Thousands, Winters replied. Inhabited systems. They're planning to wipe the slate clean and start over. Mitchell opened a channel to Ross's team. Commander, you need to find and disable that reset device immediately. The entire galaxy depends on it. Inside the crystal structure, Ross received the message just as a new chamber opened before them, revealing a massive machine pulsing with blinding light. I think we found it, he said grimly. The Galactic Reset Device towered over Ross and his team, its core pulsing with energy that threatened to unmake thousands of worlds. Streams of power flowed from the consciousness network into the machine, feeding its deadly purpose. How do we stop it? Ross asked, scanning the alien technology with his handheld device. Carter studied the readings. The machine is drawing power from their entire network. We need to cut that connection. The team's tech specialist pointed to crystal formations around the base of the device. These look like control nodes. If we can disrupt them simultaneously, it might break the power flow. They moved quickly, placing specialized disruptors at each node. Outside, the battle raged as the Solidarity fleet engaged waves of energy beings. Their specially designed weapons were effective, but the fleet was taking heavy losses. As Ross placed the final disruptor, a powerful voice echoed through the chamber. You cannot stop what must be. Evolution requires reset. A massive energy being, larger and brighter than any they had seen before, materialized in the center of the room. The Elder of the Ascendancy had arrived. Your species has shown remarkable resilience, the Elder said, its voice vibrating the air. But you are still too young to understand the cycle of creation and destruction that maintains balance. We understand enough, Ross replied. You feed on suffering and justify it as necessary evolution. The Elder's light pulsed angrily. We have watched countless civilizations rise and fall. We have guided evolution for millions of years. You exist because of our work. And now we're ending yours, Carter said, activating his disruptor. The Elder lashed out with tendrils of energy, throwing team members across the room. Ross dove behind a crystal formation as energy blasts scorched the ground where he had stood. The disruptors need more time to synchronize, the tech specialist called out. We need to hold this position for 2 more minutes. Ross and his team returned fire with their specialized weapons, each blast temporarily disrupting the Elder's form. But the being was too powerful, regenerating almost instantly. Carter analyzed the energy patterns as they fought. The Elder is directly connected to the power source. If we could sever that connection. How? Ross asked, dodging another energy blast. Carter looked at his own equipment, then at the consciousness network. Someone needs to enter the network and overload the Elder's connection from within. His face was grim. It's a one-way trip. Before Ross could respond, Carter sprinted toward the main crystal cluster. Keep the Elder busy, he shouted. Ross and the team intensified their fire, drawing the Elder's attention away from Carter. The former intelligence officer reached the central crystal and attached his equipment to it. What are you doing? The Elder demanded, sensing the intrusion. Something you never expected, Carter replied. Self-sacrifice. He activated his device and was immediately engulfed in light. His body dissolved as his consciousness was pulled into the network. Inside the digital realm, Carter's mind raced through the Ascendancy's system, following connections until he found the Elder's power source. In the physical chamber, the Elder screamed as its connection to the network was suddenly severed. Its form flickered and diminished, no longer able to draw power. At the same time, the disruptors activated, cutting the reset device's power supply. "The device is shutting down," the tech specialist announced as the ominous pulsing faded. The weakened Elder collapsed to the ground, its once brilliant light now dim. Ross approached cautiously. "You could have used your knowledge to help species evolve peacefully," he said. "Instead, you chose to feed on conflict. Without us, chaos will reign," the Elder whispered. "Maybe," Ross agreed, "but it will be our chaos to manage, not yours to control." 3 days later, Ross stood with Admiral Mitchell and Lisa Winters in Earth's rebuilt council chamber. Representatives from dozens of species filled the room, many former enemies now cautiously allied. "The Ascendancy's leaders have been contained," Mitchell reported. "Their dimensional gateway is under constant guard." Winters looked out at the gathered representatives. "What now? The old Galactic Council is gone forever. We build something better," Ross suggested, "not based on false peace enforced from above, but on mutual respect and practical cooperation." Outside the chamber window, Earth's garden stretched toward the horizon, simple and beautiful. Representatives walked among the plants, former enemies talking quietly together. "We don't need grand council chambers," Winters said. "We need understanding. Rules of engagement that protect civilians. Trade agreements that benefit everyone." Mitchell nodded. "The Solidarity Defense Force will maintain security while we build this new system." Ross watched as a Xylani diplomat offered a seedling to a consortium representative. A small gesture, but significant. "It won't be perfect," he said. "There will still be conflicts, disagreements. But they'll be our own," Winters finished, "not manipulated by ancient beings for their own purposes." As the sun set over Earth, representatives from worlds that had been at war just weeks before continued their quiet conversations in the garden. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in galactic history, species would forge their own destiny together.